Welcome to A Student of Leadership, a micro-podcast where leaders are made one habit at a time. Hosted by Rob Adams, a leadership veteran with 30 years of experience, this podcast explores key concepts that define exceptional leadership. Each episode delves into a powerful word or strategy, offering practical insights and real-world stories. Whether you're just starting out or an experienced executive, join Rob as he guides you in learning, growing, and leading with purpose.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Student of Leadership. I'm Robert Adams, and this is episode 72, Walking Away from a Title You Spent 30 Years Earning. Now, a note before I start today. This is the very first episode of A Student of Leadership I am recording as my full-time work. As of last Friday, July 3rd, I am no longer EVP at UniPro Foodservice, and after 3 decades in food distribution, I've transitioned to a Student of Leadership LLC full-time. Now, it's the same framework, same voice, same work, and the container is different, but the substance is not. That transition is the backdrop for what we are talking about today. The transition is not the story. The leadership lesson is. On Monday, the Leadership Table newsletter on Substack opens Q3 with the title versus the work argument. Most senior leaders are far more attached to their titles than they realize, and the title maintenance crowds out of the work the title was supposed to make possible. The newsletter walks through the trap, 3 questions worth sitting with, and the play. If you've not read it, link will be in the show notes. And Friday's Breaking Bread on LinkedIn has the play in an operational form. That drops at 6:45 a.m., link always in the show notes for you to grab. And if you missed last week's episode 71, we closed Q2 with the napkin. This is about the trust audit, the 5 small behaviors that quietly destroy trust. That episode is in your feed and worth looking back for. I want to start today with what I saw in the last few weeks of holding the role. Now, I've been preparing for this transition for a long time. The decision to step away was not new. The actual experience of the last few weeks before stepping out was new. And what I noticed in those weeks is the most useful material I can give you in this question. The closer I got to my last day, the more clearly I could see how much of my daily energy had been going towards maintaining the role versus doing the work the role was supposed to enable. Decisions that could have been made in 5 minutes were getting wrapped up in protocol that required 20. Conversations that should have been 3 sentences became 15-minute meetings because the meeting itself was a deliverable separate from the conversation. Status updates accumulated to the point where the act of producing the status had eclipsed the work the status was reporting on. None of this was malicious. Nobody designed it that way. It accumulated the way most senior level scaffolding accumulates, one reasonable addition at a time, until the scaffolding becomes indistinguishable from the building. Now, I'm not unique in this. Nearly every senior leader I've coached over the last several years has described some version of the same pattern, and very few often of them have done much about it. You see, the trap is invisible from the inside. You cannot see what your title is asking you to maintain because the maintenance is what your title looks like. Stop performing it and you don't look like the role anymore. So you keep performing. If this content resonates, the leadership newsletter goes deeper every Monday morning. First thing, one leadership idea grounded in the place-setting framework with one specific play you can run the same week. It's on Substack, free to subscribe, and this week's piece on titled-based leadership is one worth reading carefully if any of this is landing with you. Link is in the show notes. Now, I want to talk about the 3 questions we're sitting with right now. And the newsletter walks through 3 diagnostic questions. I want to spend a minute on each. First question is about energy ratio. What part of your daily energy is going towards maintaining the title rather than doing the work the title was supposed to make possible? The honest version of this answer is uncomfortable for most senior leaders. We are taught that the maintenance is the work. The boards reinforce it. The peer group reinforces it. The communication norms reinforce it. The first time a leader genuinely audits their own calendar against the question of what produced an actual outcome versus what produced the appearance of one, the ratio is almost always shocking. Second question is about conversations. What conversations are you avoiding because the title makes them feel more weighted than they need to be? This is one of the most senior leader flinch moments. Titles inflate the perceived stakes of the conversations that, stripped of position, are simply leadership work. The hard feedback to a longtime team member, the honest assessment with a peer, the direct conversation with a board member who's been pulling in a counterproductive direction, the performance review that needs to be much more direct than the version the leader is willing to deliver. Each one is harder to have because the title makes the consequences feel larger. Often they are not. Often the title is just the leader's reason for not having the conversation. And the third question is the diagnostic one. If you've walked away from your title tomorrow, what would you do on Monday morning? Now that's not fantasy as diagnostic. The leaders whose answer is the same as what they are already doing have aligned title to the work. The leaders whose answer is significantly different have a gap that is costing them more than they realize. And that gap is rarely talked about. It is the one of the most important things a senior leader can know about themselves. And in the place-setting framework, this is the question the plate has been asking the whole time. What are you actually serving your team? Not what your role description says, not what your calendar implies, what lands. Now, AI is changing what the answer can be. The maintenance work of senior leadership is being automated faster than most leaders are willing to admit. Status updates, information synthesis, coordination overhead. As the operational scaffolding of the role gets thinner, the question of what the title was actually supposed to enable becomes harder to avoid. The leaders who matter in the next decade are the ones whose work actually requires their judgment, presence, and voice, not the ones whose title produces the appearance of those things. Now, I'm not telling you to walk away from your title. Most leaders should not. The structural function of titles is real, and a title is often the right platform for the work the leader needs to do. What I'm telling you is the gap between role and contribution is worth measuring honestly before something forces you to. The Leadership Table newsletter is on Substack every Monday morning. This week's piece on title-based leadership is there. Link is in the show notes. And Friday's Breaking Bread on LinkedIn has the play in that operational form. That link is also in the show notes. Next week, we move into the second piece of the honest quarter, the conversation you cannot outsource. These are hard conversations as the leader work in AI cannot replace and delegation cannot solve. It is the right next move from this one. I'd love for you to subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favorite podcast network, and the links are in the show notes for both Apple and Spotify. And if this episode gave you something, share it with another senior leader you know who's carrying more in their title than they would want to admit. Run the play this week, and this week's play is to stop one piece of title work for a week. Pick one piece of title work. Stop doing it for 1 week. Notice what happens. If nothing cracks, the work was maintenance. If something cracks, you've learned what was load-bearing. Either way, you've learned something the title would not have let you learn from the inside. Thanks so much for listening to A Student of Leadership. I'm Robert Adams, and I'm still learning too. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of A Student of Leadership. Leadership is about who we become and how we help others grow. If you found value in this podcast, share it with a fellow leader and connect with Rob on LinkedIn or leave a review. New episodes drop weekly, so don't forget to subscribe to stay connected. Until next time, keep learning, growing, and leading with intention. Remember, great leaders are made one habit at a time. See you next time on A Student of Leadership.